Okay, so this is a topic that's been hotly contested and debated for some time now. How much is the Xbox ROG Ally X actually going to cost? Well, pre-orders are open now, and we do actually have some idea. In fact, we have complete ideas of what the pricing is, and it's quite high, should we say, especially in the US. Let's talk about the base Ally first of all: $600, £500, €600. Ally X, the one that we're really looking forward to, $1,000, 999 of your US bucks, £799, £800, 899 euros. Wow, that's quite expensive for an Xbox, a console. It's certainly going to be interesting to see how much of a take up that is that there's going to be for that. Oliver, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, on the one hand, it's expensive. On the other hand, we were kind of expecting it.
Yeah, I think at least in most markets here in Europe, the UK, Canada, it's basically as expected. The prices line up with the early leaks. So you have an £800 price, for instance, in the UK. You have a €900 price across Europe, which is high, but relative to other devices in this category, like the Lenovo Legion Go 2, that costs, I think, a few $100s more. Relative to obviously like the GPD Win 5, that's like, $500, $600, $700 more, depending on the configuration. Could be a lot more money than that. So I think in that context, that is a reasonable price. I think the surprise here has been that the US price seems to be $100 more than anticipated, because there was an earlier leak saying that it would be $550 for the base console. That's a $600 device now. $900 for the Ally X. That's apparently $1,000 now, or $999.99, like equivalent to $1,000. Yep. So I think what's going on here is basically there are two possibilities. The first possibility is just your standard question of margin and how the regional prices should be divided. A $1,000 USD asking price puts it more in line with the European pricing of the device, and actually a little bit more expensive than the Canadian pricing of the device, but puts it in kind of that realm. Whereas usually with these products, very often with these products, we see a substantial discount for US users. So the price in euros, for instance, will be the exact same nominal figure as the price in American dollars. The other possibility, which is a bit more interesting, is the idea that some of these tariffs have been priced in, these recent tariffs. So in terms of their exposure to tariffs, there could be a few possibilities. One possibility is that they're just pricing a little bit higher, up a little bit more conservatively, because they think there's some tariff risk. Another possibility is that they have some limited individual tariffs on aluminum and other material components that could go into the device that could be pushing their prices a little bit higher. And the third possibility is that they are potentially experiencing some larger tariffs in line with maybe that 30% baseline tariff, which is the tariff on Chinese goods at the moment. ASUS itself produces, I think, all their products at the moment in China, or at least that I could find. But it's important to clarify here that computers aren't affected by the 30% baseline tariff at the moment, but consoles are affected. So I guess this is a question of identity, right? If you're US CBP, do you see the ROG Ally? Do you see the Xbox Allies as computers? That's certainly my opinion. I mean, they have, keyboards, software keyboards. They're Windows devices fundamentally. They seem much more like a computer or like a tablet, which I think US CBP considers tablets in the same category as computers. They fall under the same category. They would be exempted in the same manner, I presume here. Or is it more of a console, right? So I think this is kind of an eternal question of identity, and it's possibly one that they're siding on unfavorably for Microsoft. We don't know at the moment. There's no documents that I could dig up at least that indicate this one way or the other. But if it is indeed being treated as a console, they would be subject to like 30% premiums above the import cost. It's a very high amount, and they would have to price it in to some degree, I'm sure. But just the kind of regular price, absent that whole factor, I think it's high. It's not the price that you would think is reasonable for a new portable game console. If Nintendo priced a Switch to you at $900, I don't think they'd have enormous sales. It's not a mass market price. It's a price for a firm or a set of firms, in this case, because you have Microsoft, you have ASUS, that want to make a profit, want to build market share, have to balance those two priorities. I think it's a reasonable price in that view, but it's not a console clearing $500, $400 price tag.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. This is a tricky one, right? Because, well, how much more capable is the Z2 Extreme versus the Z1 Extreme? And, because there's a proliferation of Z1 Extreme devices out there, many of which have been discounted several times over at this point. So there's going to be kind of like a performance versus price equation to do between original ROG Ally, especially the ROG Ally X, which has the 24 gigs of RAM, which I do think is very, very useful. That's also shared by the Ally X, by the way. So it could well be that the Ally X, the standard one, actually starts to look really quite compelling. And I mean, the concept of support for the Xbox features, software features, people have already got them running on the ROG Ally. Which I thought was quite an interesting turn of events.
Yeah.
So I think there's two ways to look at it, right? In terms of prevailing market conditions and tariffs and whatnot, and the fact that there is actually a lot of high-end technology within the Ally X. I mean, it's 4 nanometer processor, about 233 square millimeters. PS5 Pro, $750 product. That's 280 square millimeters, I think. So the SoC in there is going to be expensive, right? And then you have all the other stuff in there that's required to make a handheld. It's going to be quite expensive to make. So yes, I mean, in that respect, the pricing kind of looks okay in the view of other Z2 Extreme handhelds, the Lenovo Legion Go 2 is being mooted for comparison because the price there seems to have gone completely crazy. But at the same time, there's like what's happening with the other devices out there. And then there's the kind of reaction to this as because like it or not, if you put an Xbox name to it, it's going to be considered a console. Even if I kind of consider it more to be a PC handheld with Xbox features. And the concept of $1,000 console coming out is kind of just going to be, it's going to go down like a cup of cold sick to a certain part of the audience. It's really, really tricky. $600 for the base model. Actually, I'm going to take your thoughts on this before we get into some supporter questions. But what do you think of this, Alex? It is pricey. It's a pricey way to get into PC gaming, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, if you're getting into PC gaming, you'd really have to be someone who, I would say, if this is your entry device, where your idea is, I only want to play on the go, and I only want to use controller controls in games. Because as soon as you start saying, like, wait a minute, do I need to be always on the go with this device? Then the allure of a desktop PC, or even, forbid, I'm not a big laptop fan, but then it starts, even things like laptops start coming into consideration when you enter a price tier like this.
Absolutely, yeah. And the performance level is beyond.
Yeah.
If you've got like even an entry level RTX 4060 or 5060, considerably more capable than Z2 Extreme.
Yeah, really is. And so, especially in the desktop space, what you could achieve for what is $1,000 US essentially, like, you could get it. I mean, I'm not in that country, so I don't know the exact tariff situation on the price of products. I'm looking at EU prices always, but at least here, what you could get with the equivalent of 900 euros, I would say you can get a pretty amazing PC, especially if you start looking at like the older line of processors that are somewhat cheaper these days, like your AM4 parts or your 12 series Intel. You could start getting like amazing processors, and then fill the rest of that out with good enough RAM and a great GPU. So it is actually a challenge, I'd say. I think the advantage this has, though, is that it is going to, hopefully with advanced shader delivery, and hopefully with the tweaks to, almost wanted to call it the dashboard, the tweaks to the to the OS, that it becomes over time a more holistic device, that it has advantages in the meantime over a normal PC in terms of ease of use. But it's currently also still lacking that, because it doesn't have necessarily an automatic adjustment of game performance to the device. There is no like profile like NVIDIA's, optimized settings that loads up as soon as you get in a game. You have to tailor those yourself, unless for some reason the game specifically detects the device, like we see sometimes with Steam Deck. So I think it's still, this is a how do you say this? Like a breakthrough market device for them, where, at least for Microsoft, not obviously for Asus, but for where they're going to be testing waters, and you're kind of guinea pigged along the way to a certain degree.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. PS5 Pro has similarities to that too, with regards to PSSR, but it's even more holistic. It's like even bigger part of the equation here for something like this, where it's super expensive in comparison to the rest. It's not feature complete on day one by any sense of the word. So yeah, that for me, that's a tough sell at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, how do I handle this one? Because I've got the whole "this is an Xbox" thing is starting to rub me up the wrong way. It's an Xbox if you can access your Xbox library and play Xbox games on it without limitations. There are limitations, so that that thing. I can understand. It's almost like a break with the past. This is an Xbox. Then maybe in brackets underneath it should be going forward. Because there's, it's not an Xbox really. I can't play my 360 games on there. I can't play my OG games. Limited access to my series library, etc., etc., etc. That's kind of a bit of a challenge for me. And you're quite right, Alex. The kind of plug and play nature of a console isn't quite there yet. There are strides being made, however. Let's talk about some supporter questions. That will move me on. Noble Heroine asks, okay, new question. We have pricing for the Xbox ROG Ally, $600 for the base model and $1,000 for the X model. That's not a low price. What's your take on the system's positioning within the market, and which market are they aiming for exactly? Here's the thing, right? I don't think they're aiming for a traditional console market. Obviously, they're not with those price points. You have got the $600 one in there, which the non-X Ally, but the power gulf between that and the X is quite significant, very significant, because it is essentially an offshoot of the Steam Deck's APU, which is nowhere near as good as Z2 Extreme. So system positioning, I think it's just aiming at, it's looking to expand the PC handheld audience, who are used to spending quite a lot of money on these devices. I can't see it looking to dramatically increase the size of that particular market segment. What do you think there, Oliver? I'm curious about your take on that.
Yeah, I don't know that they're really thinking about positioning in the market. I think they're really trying to find a point at which they can make some money and not necessarily, get it in such a way that it will expand that market hugely. But within this kind of realm of dedicated PC handhelds, the other devices are for the most part comparable in price or more expensive. If you look back to devices like the Ally X, that's a pretty similar price. Legion Go 2, much higher price. Other devices, higher prices as well. It's just when you start looking at the broader handheld market, it gets a little bit less clear, like the Steam Deck at the moment. You can get an LCD Steam Deck model for $320 American on the Valve store. It's on sale currently. I'd venture those are models that look pretty favorable up against the cheaper ROG Ally. Certainly much, much cheaper than the Ally X. And then, of course, in dedicated gaming handheld land, you have the Switch 1, Switch 2, much cheaper devices. Switch 2, probably in a lot of respects, pretty comparable handheld experience, if not a better handheld experience, I'd venture, than that cheaper model. In terms of game performance, I would think, based on at least on my own testing, and a variety of software. So it's not really competitive with those more dedicated devices. It is competitive with the Windows handhelds, even though that's like, this is a slice of a slice of a slice of a gaming market. It's a pretty small portion that I'm comparing it to. Yeah. But within that market, it's a competitive price, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we've got this, that kind of dovetails into this supporter question from Eric Hurst. Hello, gentlemen. With the check notes, Asus Republic of Gamers Xbox Ally starting at $600, that puts it smack in the middle of the two Steam Deck OLED SKUs. I've heard you say multiple times before that Steam OS is what truly sets the Steam Deck apart from other PC gaming handhelds. However, the new Xbox experience on the Xbox Ally seems quite promising based on early impressions from those on regular Allies. With the price being what it is, and assuming that that the Windows 11 handheld experience has truly improved, including not requiring me to plug in a keyboard, and I'll add mouse. Do you think the Xbox Ally could be an ideal mainstream competitor to the Steam Deck? Cheers. Well, Oliver, I'm going to go to you again on this one because tricky, isn't it? What could I say? The the OLED is a really special piece of kit, I think. But I'm not sure if the non-X Ally has a VRR screen. Do you?
Both devices, I believe, have the same screen, which is sourced. It's the same panel as
right. Okay, so we'll have VRR then.
We'll have VRR.
That's useful.
So that is potentially a big advantage, is that if you want to play a really demanding game that needs a fast CPU, that needs a fast GPU, that LIX looks favorable. If you want to play a game that in general, just you think it will have spotty performance, you don't think you'll be able to hold 60 FPS, 30 FPS, 90 FPS, 120 FPS, whatever your frame rate target might be, then having VRR is a huge advantage. I think on these devices, like on PC, VRR is a nice to have, I think, at least for me, nice to have, not necessary to have, because in most cases I can lock to 60 FPS just fine, or I can lock to 120 and lock to 90, whatever. On handhelds, getting that precise frame rate lock is much more challenging, I find. So VR is actually a huge boon to this device. And then there are some things you can do on a Windows-based device you cannot do on a SteamOS-based device. I can't play a game with anti-cheat, for the most part, like kernel anti-cheat, on a Steam Deck. I can play the new Battlefield, for instance, on a ROG Ally device. I cannot play that on a Steam Deck device. Or Game Pass games. Game Pass in its entirety, which is a huge part of the PC platform nowadays, is entirely excluded, unless you want to do streaming, of course, which is its own, own can of worms. But if you want to run Game Pass games natively on your device, then you have to go over to these Windows devices. So I think there are some cases for it. Now, there are limited cases. I mean, if you're just thinking about, do I want to play games on the go more broadly, I think in a lot of cases you're going to be pulled to a Steam Deck or a Switch too. But if you're thinking specifically about these use cases, if you are an enthusiast, I think this is potentially a compelling device.
Mm-hmm. Any final thoughts there, Alex?
No, I just do at least it has some measure of success in its technical aspirations, regardless of price, about how it wants to change the Windows gaming ecosystem, advanced shader delivery, changes a version of Windows that has less junk in it and a more gaming or just performance orientated profile, that classical productivity. I would like to see those things moved on more so even than these devices.